Hello, I'm Bo, and welcome back to another episode of Final FMC, my horror-themed TBR game where I get to play as a final girl going up against a killer TBR every month. So I'm a penguin today, and I just realized penguins don't have ears, so I don't know why they added these little like fuzzballs here. I don't know. But anyways, I know that it is winter time, it's Christmas time, and I do love Christmas as much as I love Halloween, but I still love horror all year round, and that's not gonna stop me from reading my horror-themed books and playing my horror-themed TBR game. I travel around the board using a 6-sided dice, and depending on where I land, I draw prompt cards based on the different spaces on the board. Here's a little cheat sheet so you know what each space actually does. There are 5 different spaces, that is killers, locations, weapons, victims, and plot twists. My TBR is complete when the killer drops to 0 lives. Of course, for a more in-depth overview of the rules, you can go back to the very first video in this series where I explain it in detail, or you can download your own version of the game. It's a digital download where you get to play along and see all the rules. I have it in a rule book, and I'll have that all linked in the description down below. If I haven't introduced you to Penny before, this is Penny. She's my little cavapoo. She's 3 years old, and she is pulling off her little Cindy Lou Who hairdo today. So for all my year-round spooky girlies, let's jump into the epilogue for November's TBR. Now, during the epilogue, I lose 1 life for every book on my TBR that I did not read. I do have a chance to regain any lost lives if I had any saved victims or location prompt cards. If my final girl drops to 0 lives, I lose, the killer wins and gets resurrected to kill another day. But if I have at least 1 life left by the end of the epilogue, I've defeated the killer and that killer is removed from the game. Okay, in the month of November, it looks like I had to bring the cheerleader back to life for her second chance. So I did roll on the second chance table, which gave me the prompt of Back from the Dead, and I had to read a book about the undead. So I had chose Buffalo Hunter Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones, and I'm happy to say that I did read that book. I also voted for it for the Goodreads Choice Awards in the horror section. So we'll find out on December 4th if my vote was the winner for 2025 Best Horror or Fan Favorite Horror of the Year. The second prompt I had for November was the cheerleader prompt, because I did play as the cheerleader again since I did bring her back to life. So her prompt, as always, I feel like I've been the cheerleader for like 3 months in a row, is strong FMC. So I chose The Hunger Games because I had never read the book, even though I've watched all the movies, and it was absolutely a 5-star read. I loved it. I read it. It was just as good as I expected it to be, and I really want to continue reading the series. Now, my third book from the November TBR was the Resurrected Killer prompt. So since I didn't defeat the Tormentor in October, that killer was resurrected, and I had to do one of their prompts as a punishment for not beating them in October. So I chose to do the BDSM prompt again because that book had been on my TBR a couple times and I never read it. So I chose Desperate Measures once again, and I actually read it this month, and boy oh boy was that a fun book. That was my last book of November. I just squeezed it in at the tail end on the 29th and 30th of November, and I finished it, and whoo, I'm a fan of Katie Robert. I want to continue the series. Let's just say that. Wow. The fourth book on my November TBR was the killer prompt. So I chose The Ghost was my killer of November. So I had to choose that first prompt on their card, and I chose the Grief or Loss prompt. And for that prompt, I chose This Thing Between Us by Gus Moreno, and unfortunately, I did not get around to reading it. Now, I will say I read like 10 and a half books in November, and I had 7 books on my final FMC TBR, and even though I read 10 or 11 books, they were not all from my final FMC TBR, so I didn't read this one, and I'm going to lose a life for it. Then I had a saved victim, so I do have the boyfriend, so if I do need to regain a life by the end of this, I could potentially sacrifice the boyfriend at the end. We'll see if we need to get there. So the next prompt that I got was another killer space, and for that one I chose the folk horror prompt off of that card, and I had chosen Sisters of a Lost Nation by Nick Medina. And as much as I wanted to read that book, I just didn't get around to it. So maybe save that one for another day, but unfortunately I will have to lose another life for that. Now the sixth book on my November TBR was the victim card that I picked up, and that goes on the killer's body count because I could not save that victim, and I chose the skeptic. That prompt was for me to choose a hyped or popular book and see if it was really worth all the hype. And the book I chose for that was Wake Up and Open Your Eyes by Clay McLeod Chapman, and I loved it. I definitely think that book is worth the hype. It is super weird, but definitely recommend. I'm pretty sure I rated that 5 stars. Or 4. Maybe 4 or 5. I don't know, but I really liked it. It was a weird one. But it was so good. The seventh and final book I had on my November TBR was another killer prompt, which ended the game for me, and that was a supernatural or paranormal prompt, and for that I chose Mexican Gothic, which ended up being my favorite book of November. I loved her writing so much, and I'm hoping that all her books bring me as much joy as this one did. So with all that being said, I ended up with 1 life to spare, which means I successfully defeated the ghost, and she is now removed from the game. 3 out of 14 killers have been defeated, 5 out of 5 final girls are still alive, and I did notice last time I did make a mistake on how many saved victims I had because I never counted the very first saved victim I had in, I believe it was the September game. So I've adjusted that now, which means we have 2 victims added to the killer's body count and 3 saved victims overall. And don't forget, if you want to hear my full thoughts on all the books that I read in November, not just from my final FMC game, but for the entire month, including all the ones I read for the Dungeons and Book Dragons readathon, please stay tuned, like and subscribe so you can see when my next video comes out, which is going to be that November reading wrap up. And then I can tell you all my thoughts. Okay, but for now, let's jump into the game for December's TBR. Look at that, I finally chose a different final girl. I got the nerd this time, and her prompt is to read a sci-fi or fantasy book. And her perk is that if I choose to put a book that is over 400 pages on my TBR, I get to replace any other prompt with a mood read if I so choose. That being said, I'm going to put The Will of the Many by James Islington on my TBR for my nerd. And that book is way over 400 pages. Therefore, I have gained the ability to substitute any other prompt with a mood read if I want to. Now, I think what I'm going to do is I will choose books to fit all the other prompts that I get for the game. But at any point during the month, if I don't feel like reading that book, I'm going to choose a mood read instead, and it will not penalize me. So that's actually a really good perk, in my opinion, and I'm excited about it. Although it does mean I have to read a really chunky book. I think it'll be okay. I really wanted to read this book anyways. I kind of had to because I'm doing a secret vlog that I've been working on for way too long, and I have to read that book in order to continue, so I really needed to get it on my TBR. So I'm happy about it, even though it's super long. I've heard so many people love this book, so I think it'll be okay. At the elite Katanen? Not sure. Academy, a young fugitive uncovers layered mysteries and world-changing secrets in this new fantasy series by international bestseller author of whatever, Adi Vidi Tachi. Okay, I don't even know if I said that right. I don't know. We're just gonna read it. I have this book on audiobook because there was no way that I was gonna sit there with a 639-page book in my hands and try to read it like that. Plus, it's fantasy, so I'm assuming there's gonna be a lot of made up words that I probably won't even understand, or weird names, because, you know, fantasy, right? So I feel like the audiobook is probably going to be the way to go. Now with that, let's go ahead and choose my killer. Okay, so the killer for this month is the Hillbilly, and the first prompt I'm choosing off of the Hillbilly card is add a true crime book to your TBR or a book inspired by true events. Okay, so for that one, I'm choosing a book that has been on my radar for a while. I've never heard anybody talk about this book. I don't even know how I found out about it, but I've been wanting to read it for a very long time, like probably a full year. And that is The Minds of Billy Milligan by Daniel Keyes. Now, the reason why I'm so intrigued by this book is because it is a nonfiction book that tells the story of Billy Milligan, who was the first person in US history acquitted of a major crime by pleading dissociative identity disorder. So in the synopsis on Goodreads, it says, Billy Milligan can be anyone he wants to be, except himself. Out of control of his actions, Billy Milligan was a man tormented by 24 distinct personalities, battling for supremacy over his body. A battle that culminated when he awoke in jail, arrested for the kidnap and rape of 3 women. Honestly, I don't know anything about this case. I never even heard of it before I found this book. I'm just so fascinated by the idea of dissociative identity disorder. I know there's a lot of, media around that. And, I think it used to be called multiple personality disorder. And, there was, what's that movie with Sally Field? Oh, yeah, Sybil. We have, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, Fight Club, Me, Myself, and Irene, United States of Terra. And I know a lot of those, movies or TV shows are exaggerated and probably not like true to the actual mental health disorder and the reality of all that. It's just an idea. It's just a topic that I would like to learn more about, and reading a nonfiction about a true person, I can get a little bit more insight, especially someone who was involved in a true crime scenario. So I'm actually very fascinated with true crime. So I just think it's going to be a very interesting read. Now, this book was written in 1981, so I'm sure there's so much more information about this disorder now that I could learn from, but it's still a book that I am really interested in picking up. So I'm going to get it on my TBR, and hopefully I will get to it this month. Okay, so for the first roll of my TBR game, I did land on a killer space, which means I have to choose another prompt from the killer card. So I am going to go with add a book to your TBR that deals with systemic oppression. And for that one, I'm going to choose James by Percival Everett. Now, I'm choosing this book because this is a reimagining of Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and it goes into the character of James, or I think he was Jim in the original story. I honestly cannot remember. I read that when I was a kid, and I have heard since, and I don't remember, that it was very problematic. I mean, I don't know if I need to reread it. I do own it, and I was curious about reading the Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer books and then reading James, and I might still do that just to see the differences or how they portray him in the original book versus the new one, but I also have heard that you don't need to read the originals because it's its own story of the character of James and his life and his perspective and his experience. And I'm really excited to read from his perspective, and I love that the author has given this man a voice. And it won the Pulitzer Prize. Now, I don't actually know what that means, but I know that is a very prestigious book award. It's a very prestigious literary award, which means this book is amazing and needs to be read. Like, this is gonna be a classic of all time, I'm sure. So I just know, like, really important literary works get the Pulitzer Award. Like, this is no Goodreads Choice Award fan favorite, okay? Like, this is a prestigious book award. I probably should have done some research before I start talking about it because I don't know anything about it, but I know it's a big deal, okay? So I'm excited to read it and feel like I'm reading something very much worth reading. But I'm excited to get this on my TBR because part of my 25 and 25 challenge that I created for myself at the beginning of the year was to read a book that has a Black male protagonist as the main character of the story. And that posed a much more difficult challenge than I anticipated. Now, it has been very easy to find books with Black female main characters, but not so much Black male main characters, at least amongst the books that I've been interested in reading. So I've noticed that a lot of books that I read, the main character is usually a female. So finding any book with a main character that's a male is a little bit more difficult for me. I mean, I like the female perspective. What can I say? So I just Googled it because I was curious, and it said the first Pulitzer Prizes were awarded in 1917. And Google has confirmed that this is a prestigious American award recognizing excellence in journalism, literature, and music. My next roll landed me on a victim space, and because I could not save that victim, it goes into the killer's body count, and the victim card I pulled was the guide. And for that prompt, I had to choose one out of the first 3 books that I saw on my social media feed. So I'm gonna go to Bookstagram for this. Okay, honestly, those were 3 really good choices. I have been seeing that first book around and I've heard really good things about it. Like, the 2 people that I've seen read it so far have rated it, I believe, 5 stars. I just don't know that I am in the mood to read it, but it's on my radar and I did add it to my want to read on Goodreads. So it's there in the future when I feel like looking into it and picking it up eventually. But for now, not gonna go with that one. If you can see in the distance here, this like stack of books that are on this back shelf, those are all my Goosebumps books, and I very easily could choose one of those and add it to my TBR for such a quick, easy read. I feel like that would be such an easy win for me to choose a Goosebumps book. I mean, it obviously one that is pictured there, and I'm sure that I could find any one of those in my stack because I have almost all of them. Humble brag. But I'm actually going to have to go with The End by Adam Costco because I have an e-arc of that book and it comes out December 6th. So because I accepted that, I would like to actually read it. So that was kind of a big push to be like, hey, read the book that you accepted the arc of. So that's what I'm gonna do. So this author has reached out to me previously to read a couple of his other books as arcs, and I've accepted every single time because the first book I ever read from him was The Dream Killer, and that book was wild. I give that book 5 stars just because it had me, like, in a complete tailspin. I was just in that place of like, what the heck is going on? The whole time that book had me feeling crazy out of my mind. Like, what is happening? Because that's what the character was experiencing the whole time. And you're just reading it and you're just in so much of a complete state of what is happening. That book had me on a ride. And so for that, I had to give it 5 stars because it was just a crazy journey. And the ending was just completely unexpected and just blew me away. So anytime Adam Costco reaches out to me and says, do you want to read an arc of my upcoming book? I say yes, because I'm intrigued by this man's writing. So I'm actually sitting on 2 arcs from him. Perverts, which actually came out in September, which I haven't got around to yet, but I really want to, and The End, which comes out December 6th. So I still have time to read that one and review it before it comes out. So I'm really gonna probably start that one first. Was it like that one book hit for me and the other ones are just kind of okay? Or are all of his books bangers? Like, I'm ready to find out. Okay, but if you ask me what it's actually about, I don't know. So let me read the synopsis. When Eli's beloved Celine dies under mysterious circumstances, his world fractures. Consumed by grief, Eli stumbles into a clandestine cult. Ding, 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 I'm intrigued. That promises proof of life beyond death, a chance, however impossible, to see Celine again. The cult's teachings are seductive, its rituals unsettling, but hidden within their devotion lies the truth about Celine's final days. Was her death a tragic accident or the fulfillment of a sinister prophecy? You had me at call, baby. You had me at call. For my last roll of my TBR game, I landed on the killer space again. So I'm going to read the 3rd and final prompt off of this card. So that one is going to be prompt number 2, which is add a book to your TBR about a disturbing or dysfunctional family. So for this one, I first instinctually, my brain went to, oh, read Brother, because I had heard that book is crazy and about a dysfunctional family. But then my brain said, what about something a little darker? Which, if you've read Brother, which I haven't, but if you've read it, you probably already know that book is a dark, disturbing horror book, from what I've heard. My brain was like, let's get a little crazier and pick up a book that I have been dying to pick up ever since I first heard someone talk about it over on Bookstagram. And this book is called Made a Monster, a Splatterpunk novel by Rob Nelson. Now, if you read the synopsis on Goodreads, it does not tell you what this is really about. Okay, it gives you the vaguest indication of what you're getting into. Adrian and Kendra are a match made in hell. Adrian's dark past left him with a twisted imagination that takes him deep into the forest where he does unspeakable things. Kendra is new to town. She has a dark secret of her own and an unhealthy obsession with a boy she hasn't even met yet. Yeah, okay. That gives you nothing. So if you went into this book just based on that alone, my gosh, would you be blown away by the myriad of trigger warnings that you would stumble into.
Her mum dates men who are really into very young girls, takes them home to meet her teenage daughter. They then essay her together. This then repeats with a lot of different men, and her mum makes her feel like she is the problem. Made a Monster by Rob Nelson follows a teenage girl called Kendra. Kendra and her mum had to move towns because Kendra did something bad in the place where they used to live. When she goes to her new school, she meets a guy called Adrian, and she takes a bit of a liking to him and one day decides to follow him. She follows him into the woods, and when she catches up with him, she finds him mutilating and violating animals and thinks to herself, this would be a really good guy to be in a relationship with. Yeah. So together they form this relationship and decide to start basically planning revenge on people who they feel made them into the monsters that they are. They start planning pretty graphic deaths for people that they basically want to get revenge on, and together go on a really horrible killing spree. I will save you the details, but you should read it. They're very gross. I really enjoyed this book, although it was gritty, it was dark, it was really kind of horrible in places and hard to read, but it worked really well. It releases on the 11th of April, and as always, if you are going to read it, please do remember to check trigger warnings, because this has pretty much every single one of them.
This was actually the very first video I saw from Emily over at the Haunted Shelf on Bookstagram, and I immediately followed her page after that. I just was so blown away by how graphic that description was, and I could not believe that was in a book. And I was right away absolutely intrigued. I was like, this sounds crazy. I need to read this. I don't know why. I was just like, this sounds absolutely vile, but it also sounds like the best revenge story. And when you talk about the prompt being a dysfunctional family, I mean, what could be worse than this? Like, that is like vile. Like, talk about the worst parents ever written in fiction. Like, this has to take the cake, right? I don't know, but yeah, I have to read this. I'm actually going to read this as a buddy read / book club read with a few of my friends, my in-person friends, because they were just as interested in messed up content as I am, and maybe this is why we're friends. But I was like, oh, we should just do like an extreme horror book club and read all the most effed up books we could find. And yeah, that's what we're gonna do. So I read Playground in October, and I was ranting and raving about it, so they started reading it and they have been loving it, and I think they're almost done with it. So I was like, hey, our December book club pick is gonna be Made a Monster, let's read it together. And they're on board and we're ready to dive into it. And yeah, I don't know, maybe that could become a thing if there's any other weirdos out there that love extreme horror and want to like delve into that a little bit. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much extreme horror, splatterpunk I want to be reading on a regular basis, but like I've said before, every now and again, I think I like to sprinkle it in just for the sake of like, whoa, that's something crazy. With splatterpunk specifically, there is always kind of like a message behind it. There's like a why, and it's not just shock value or, you know, violence or, you know, disturbing content for the sake of being shocking or graphic, just, you know, for graphic sake. It's always leading to, you know, a bigger message and a commentary on something. So that kind of made me feel a little bit safer, I guess, to want to pick up his book, so that it wasn't just going to be like gratuitous, disgusting content because he just wanted to put that on the page. Like, there is going to be a message at the end of it. And with his, what it sounds like is it's going to be like a really intense revenge story about these kids kind of taking back what their parents did to them and turning it around and getting that revenge that they so desire. And, you know, take that as what you will or whatever, but I think that the fact that there's an actual story around those things makes me feel better about picking it up. So we'll see how it goes, but it sounds pretty interesting to me. I'm sure we can get into a deep dive psychology lesson on, you know, why people read these kinds of books, why people like horror, why people read extreme horror. I don't know. I don't have a psychology degree. I have no idea why this appeals to me. I don't know. I guess looking at it in the lens of fiction and telling myself that this is just a story makes it feel less frightening than the fact that stuff like this happens out in the world every day. And I don't know, I guess putting the sense that there's going to be some revenge and they can kind of take back a piece of that for themselves and kind of get back at the people that did these really messed up things to them, I feel like there's a sense of justice, makes it feel a little bit better, you know? Yeah, I don't know. But anyways, that's gonna be my TBR for December. Yeah, super holiday spirit, right? Family and feel good. Yeah, I definitely don't read on theme for the season, clearly. I had in mind a Christmas book and it didn't make the list. So yeah, it is what it is. I'm not much of a cozy Christmas reader anyway, so meh. So yeah, I got 5 books and I kind of want to read them all. So we'll see if I end up using that mood read. I guess if you are actually interested, if I do end up reading any of the books that I chose for this month's TBR, you're going to want to subscribe to my channel so that you can see what happens at the end of the month. Maybe I'll do some vlogs throughout the month. I don't know. We'll see. Stay tuned. I will see you in the next video. Bye.